I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please, clerk?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere.
Here.
Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Hoffman.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. I'd like those who are able to stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now is the time that we set aside for citizens' comments. If anyone wants to make a citizen's comment on the items of the agenda as they come up during the business of the meeting section, just let us know and you can do that. But other than that, I don't have any citizens' comments at the moment. So we'll move on to officials and staff comments. We'll start with Chief Turano.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to take this opportunity, a couple of nice awards that the department received this year. And the first is for our participation in the Illinois Special Olympics, predominantly the Torch Run and Cap on Top and the other activities that we are involved in, is that we were presented as a supporter, making a donation of $7,292 to the Special Olympics of Illinois. And our thanks to Sergeant Matt Komar, who spearheads this effort every year to set these activities up and be a liaison with Special Olympics. The other thing is a major event that we're involved in is our Toys for Tots campaign, which happens around the holiday season each year. We were presented as being an outstanding supporter of the Marine Corps Toys for Tots program. This is headed up by Detective Mike Pasiak from our department, who makes sure that he coordinates with the Marine Corps to collect all the toys here at the police department and City Hall and get them over so that the kids can have a Christmas. And this year, just so that you know for your information, in DuPage County, Toys for Tots collected 50,932 toys. That was able to provide toys to 27,345 kids to make their Christmas a little happier. So my thanks to our outstanding officers who participated in this, and also our citizens who support us during these activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, those are wonderful, wonderful commendations to have today, both really good causes. Any other officials and staff comments? Okay, I only have one. I attended a wonderful meeting of the Fermilab Community Advisory Board last Thursday, and we welcomed the newest Warrenville member, Deborah Swindon, who's joining us on the board. It's wonderful to have a little more Warrenville representation on that board. And things are going really well at Fermilab. We had a Q&A with Nigel Lockyer, the director of Fermilab, who updated us on a lot of the projects going on over there. They're doing so many different things, it's hard to keep it all straight. I know there is sometimes misinformation out there that says Fermilab's closing, and I really want to emphasize how untrue that is. They have a lot going on, which is wonderful. All right, time for the business of the meeting. We'll start with item number 1, which is going to be an informational presentation on Community Unit School District 200 School Security Protocol. I'm going to start with our city administrator.
Thank you. Given the many recent events, unfortunate ones, but specifically the shootings at the school in Parkland, Florida, there was some postings on our local Facebook, community Facebook page, questioning school security for our local schools. The mayor had asked that we have someone from the school come and talk about the protocols that they use for security. So we have here tonight Dr. Rammer, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Administrative Services at Community Unit School District 200, to briefly talk, and then if there's some questions, he can provide some information. I want to point out too, we're really happy he came this week. When I first reached out, they reminded me it's spring break and many of the staff are away, but he was willing to volunteer to come and talk to us tonight, so we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coakley. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting us to come chat with you. Unfortunately, about a very serious topic, but we do thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit with you. The comments I'm going to present to you this evening, some of them are excerpt from a presentation that I attended with some local law enforcement from Don Shomit, so I wanted to be certainly willing to annotate that information. School security is certainly something that we are cognizant of all the time, not just when it happens with the school shooting issues. This high attention to school safety ebbs and flows depending on what's happening in the nation. Certainly, you'll be familiar with this beginning back in 1999 with the Columbine incident, and that's really what unfortunately put this topic on the map. It's a recurring theme that happens when immediately following these kinds of events, whether it was Columbine, whether it's the situation in Florida or in Massachusetts. But this is not a new topic for schools. School safety and security and attacks on schools certainly didn't begin in 1999. As a matter of fact, one of the first violent attacks on schools happened in 1927 in Michigan. Unfortunately, happened by, it was a school board member who burned down the school when it was open and killed hundreds of students. So this topic is not new to schools by any means. But every time one of these incidents occurs, we hear these kinds of themes pretty repeatedly. Something has to be done, and you've heard that often, certainly since the incident in Florida. We have to stop the violence, and people want answers. They want something done. They're not sure what it is, but they want something done, and that statement we've heard pretty regularly, certainly over the weekend with the demonstrations all over the country. The one that we're hearing now that surfaced is ban all guns or put guns in the hands of teachers. That's a theme that's a little new in the last year or so. When this began a number of years ago, certainly back in 1999, there was a whole notion about putting metal detectors in schools. And metal detector manufacturers sold a lot of them to schools, thinking that was going to be the answer. That was followed by ban all backpacks. You can't have any backpacks in schools, or you have to have clear backpacks. And so that was a theme that happened. But by and large, the answer was do something. No one has come up with an answer about what it is, but they want us, all of us, members of the community, to do something. What they want is a solution. They want an answer to make everybody feel comfortable that violence against students or against schools will stop. They want it to finish. They want something done. The unfortunate reality is there is no one answer. There is no simple solution that will prevent violent attacks at schools. And that's disconcerting for people. We have a district safety committee, a safety committee that's been around for a long years and probably one of the best committees, certainly in District 200. That safety committee is comprised of representatives from our school district from all different levels, from early childhood to high school, and then representatives from all our first responders. Police departments, fire departments that service District 200 have representatives on that committee. And one of the powerful things that this committee does is look at all of our safety from this standpoint. How do we prevent issues from happening? How do we delay them if we can? And if we can't, how do we minimize the potential carnage that happens? So it's not a knee-jerk response. It's not a reactive process that this committee goes through, and we meet every month to review our safety protocols, to review our procedures, to review any information that certainly our experts and as first responders bring to us. But it is in terms of, how do we prevent, how do we delay, and how do we minimize? And so as we look at these school attacks, and if we're going to start with prevent, what are the things that we have to look at to prevent these attacks on schools? Well, we have to look at the attackers. And so we spend time looking at that, what those attackers have done and what makes them attractive to our schools. So as the experts in the FBI have profiled, if you will, have analyzed these attackers, what they find pretty consistently is they see themselves as victims. I can't help it. Somebody did something to me that I have to get back at. I had no choice. You made me do this. They see themselves as victims of society. They're put upon. They are the result of something that happened to them. At some point in their lives, there's a break in reality. Their view of the world is different than ours. The lens that they see the world in is cracked, it's shattered, it's not what we see. And so they see things in a different light, which contributes to that sense of victimization. We've also heard frequently the notion about bullies create these kinds of activities. The evidence in the analysis is that bullies and school attacks are not causal. There's no causal relationship. Some of these attackers have been bullied, but some of these attackers are bullies. And so the relationship between if you stop the bullying, you'll stop the attacks really isn't accurate. If it was related to bullies, then you'd see these attackers enter school and shoot the bullies. If somebody bullied me, then I'd go after them. That's not what we see. They randomly shoot people for no particular reason. This is not a snap decision on these attackers' part. This is not something they wake up in the morning and say, let's see, it's Monday, I think I'm going to go attack a school. This is a plan that they have thought about pretty significantly over a period of time. It's a plan that's often chronicled. It's often written down someplace. They develop this plan over a period of time, and it's very frequently seen in writings, in postings, in journals, in scribbles on their paper. The plan usually takes anywhere from 3 to 12 months, so this is a thought-out process. This is something that they think about for a long time until they take action about it. It develops itself in 4 phases: in an idea phase, in a plan stage, a prepare stage, and following, and ultimately in that action. The idea stage is at some point they accept the notion that violence is a solution for them. They believe that violence is a way to settle disputes. If we have a disagreement, instead of talking about it or getting an adult to help us, violence is their answer to the problems that they face. Once they've crossed the bridge to violence, they then begin to develop this plan, to think about how it's going to happen. That's when that plan often ends up in the journals, in their school papers, in notes that they write, in scribbles, in some kind of, in electronic media, in social media events. Once they've developed the plan, then they need to prepare. They need to gather the equipment that they've decided that they're going to use, whether it's a bomb, whether it's a pressure cooker, whether it's guns or ammunition or weapons. They begin to gather this material that they have planned out to conduct this attack. And then ultimately, they try to execute this attack at some point. While there's no specific profile for these individuals, generally speaking, they are white males between the ages of 14 and 21, and generally not drug-related. While many of these attackers have abused drugs at some point, at the time of the attack is not precipitated by a hallucination or some kind of drug involvement. Most of them die during the attack, and when they do the autopsy, they find no drugs related to them at this point. So school safety goes beyond just necessarily that violence issue, that school attack. And what we're seeing is our parents are becoming much more aggressive than they used to be. I think it reflects a little bit of our society. We see society being a little more hostile, a little more aggressive, and we see that in our parent involvement. We have a number of orders of protection that we deal with on a regular basis. I would hasten, probably in all of our schools, have some kind of order of protection, either between parents or between an adult and a child that we have to monitor. I will tell you, when I started in this business, orders of protection were few and far between. They're now kind of a normal process that we deal with on a regular basis. We are faced with a number of custody issues that in years past were taken care of in the community. Officers dealt with custody issues a lot. They now come to our schools. Parents come to the building and argue about who's going to take Bob home from school. And we have to deal with that kind of hostility, and there's been times when we've had to call officers to come and intervene with parents that can't figure it out over who to take who's going to take their child home from school that day, or who's going to be at the parent conference at that time. So we think about safety in terms of not only an individual attack, but the kinds of things that happen in our schools on a regular basis. We also see an increase in evidence of potential violence with students. Our calls to DCFS certainly are not declining, and in some cases are increasing. Whether it's students or spouses that we get information about that requires us as mandatory reporters to call DCFS about children who may be abused or neglected. So if we think about, again, prevent, delay, and minimize, what are the things that we can do to prevent? Very clearly, the evidence is abundantly clear that these individual attackers lack any relationship with a significant adult. They're isolated people. They don't have a relationship with their parents. They don't have a relationship with somebody at school. They don't have an adult that can intervene and help deal with them as they go through these challenging times. And so as we think about that in terms of our school program, we're looking for ways to connect with kids at whatever level that happens to be, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a mentoring process, whether it's a club or activity or sport. If we can get children connected with an adult at an early age, that is a good way to reduce the potential or possibility of these attacks. We need to continue to secure our buildings. 88% of school attacks come through the front door. And so it's important that our front entrances are secure, and the district just approved the bids of securing additional 8 of our 13 elementary schools, of our 20 schools, to increase our security. All of our schools are secured. You can't get into any of our schools without being buzzed in. But in a number of our buildings, Johnson, for example, Bauer also, you get into the front door, but it doesn't take you into the office. So we're reconfiguring those buildings to make sure that you not only get buzzed in, but then you get trafficked into an office where an adult can intervene before you can just wander around the building. We've also taken the steps to change the notion. When I started in this business, the principal was the only person that could call 911, the only person that could call a lockdown. If there was somebody wandering around the building, the principal would go outside to find out what that person was doing. We don't do that anymore. Anybody in our building can lock that building down. Anybody can call 911 if they believe something that is happening. We don't do drills anymore for any of these. All of our exercises are live. And so at least once a year, we try to break into our buildings with law enforcement officers to see if they can get in, to see if the doors are secure, to see if anybody will let them in. And frequently, a teacher or a child will see a guy walking around the building that's not dressed in a uniform and lock that building down, call 911 because it's not safe. We want to raise the attention of everybody in the building to be sensitive to things that just don't look right. Again, we've given the authority to anybody in our school to call 911 and lock it down if it's not safe. If they see somebody that doesn't belong, the police would rather come 100 times for nothing than not come once when they really need it. We talk about filters and layers. If we can identify a threat early on from our buildings, so we want to make sure our schools are visible from inside to outside. We want to make sure our bushes and trees don't obscure vision so we can see people approaching the building if necessary. We want to make sure that all of our windows are open, although we close them at night so that we save energy. We want to be fiscally responsible, but during the day we want our windows open so we can see who's walking around outside. We work with our building and grounds people to make sure our trees aren't hanging any lower than 6 feet or bushes any higher than 3 feet, so we can see the face of people coming up to our doors. And if we don't recognize and it looks unusual, then our staff can take appropriate action. We also want to greet our students on a regular basis, and we have people that meet our buses and our car drive lines every day. If you're on the bus that I greet every day and I say hello to Stu and you did a nice job in that soccer game last night, and he greets me, and I go to John and how's things going, I build a relationship with them. I also notice if John's having a bad day and doesn't talk to me, that tells me something's going on in his life. Doesn't mean that John is going to be an attacker, but it may mean that he had a bad day and needs to talk to somebody. So I may send him to his counselor or identify his teacher to say, John doesn't look like, he feels good today. Maybe we want to pay some attention to him. We also want to spend time with the power of ownership. I call it the Disney effect. We want our schools to look like places that care. We want our schools to look like they are orderly, like they are places that people are sensitive about what's going on. We want them to look that there aren't any obstacles in the front of our building, any obstructions. This time of year, our schools always want, like we do at home, want to beautify our schools, and so they buy some little flower pots and put them up in front of the building to make it look pretty, and we've said, those are lovely, but they're also great projectiles. If you're going to put a flower pot in front of your building, get a big honking flower pot and put it by the front door so somebody can't drive in, so that they can't pick it up and throw it. It's a messaging thing. If a school looks like it's orderly, if a building looks like it's well cared for, people are less likely to do harm to it. It's that Disney effect. You go to any Disney property, why is it so clean? Because people don't want to litter things that look clean. So what does a school like that tell you about the inside and about the care of that building? It tells me that they're not very concerned about what's going on. They're not paying attention to the detail, as opposed to this school. What image does that tell you? And I know it's one of our newer schools, obviously, and one we're very proud of. But this school sends an image, but so does this. And so that image certainly is important for us, and we work hard with our building and grounds to make sure that they're safe and secure. So what are the lessons? What are the things that we need to do? We need to be vigilant. Everybody in our district has to be vigilant. Whether it's the custodian, the food service worker, the teacher, the aide, the children, they have to be vigilant and watch what's going on. We have to continue to support our positive adult relationship with students. We've got to connect kids with adults that care about them. And often it's the kid that people don't want to care about. It's the kid that's disruptive because there's things going on in his life. The kid that's not talkative, the kid that kind of causes a little problem. That's the kid that we have to find a way to connect with an adult someplace. We get our windows uncovered. We encourage our staff to watch what's going on. We pay attention to those filters and layers. We pay attention to the curb appeal of our building to make sure our buildings look good. We think in terms of prevent, delay, and minimize. And probably one of the most positive pieces we have is the relationship we have with our first responders. I'm glad to see Chief Toronto here because he's a great partner with us in our districts and our schools, and Warrenville call the department often. They give us great information, they give us great resources, and they support our schools and our kids a lot. We do training with all our departments. As a matter of fact, Warrenville is going to train at Hubble in a month. We just finished scheduling that to come practice their rapid deployment, to practice what they need to do in case of an emergency. So if there was ever an emergency at one of our schools, they know what that school looks like. They don't have to find a floor plan. They know what it's like, and they're comfortable being in that building. And we're thankful that we're able to do that. The FBI trained in one of our high schools this summer. Wheaton Police Department trains in our building. We open our buildings to make sure that they're comfortable in our building and can work every chance they get. There's also a law in Illinois that's called clear and present danger. It's a law that says if we find a student who commits an act in our school that presents clear and present danger to themselves or someone else, we have the opportunity to report that student to the state police, who put that individual on a register. And one of the things that happens being placed on that registry is that they are forbidden from getting a weapon. They can't buy a weapon, they can't get a FOI card while they're on that registry. And so, again, is it the entire answer? No, but it is a provision, certainly in Illinois, that is beneficial to us. And finally, as we look at the delay, the Stop the Bleed is a program we're just beginning this year. What the experts have found out in these attacks, including the attack in Las Vegas and the school attacks, is when these attacks happen, the police department goes in and tries to secure that facility. They're going after that attacker to take that attacker out of operation. Well, in the meantime, in virtually all of these cases, a number of people have been injured. The police aren't spending time taking care of them. They're going to get that attacker. There's that delay in time. If someone is shot or injured, what they've seen is people have bled to death because of the time before that building is secured. The EMTs can't get into the building until the police have secured it, and so that time lag has caused some deaths because they just can't get medical attention. So Stop the Bleed is a program national program sponsored by the American College of Surgeons that is like a mini first aid class and teaches people how to stop bleeding, severe bleeding quickly, how to pack a wound, how to pressure bandage, how to do tourniquets, so that in case you're involved in one of those situations, you can help somebody stop that bleeding until the police secure the facility and the medical people can get there and attention. And so we're doing a training with all our nurses and all our first responders at the end of this month. We'll then roll that out to our buildings, and we hope by next year have this Stop the Bleed program as part of our response class for our high school students, simply to train as many people as we can to be available. God forbid we should have to use that kind of training. The takeaway from all of this in terms of school taking a look at safety is the more we know, so the more conversations we have with our expert first responders, the more we prepare, the exercises we go through, the training that we go through with our staff, the more we train over and over and over again so it becomes rudimentary, the safer our children will be. Again, there's no magic answer, but if we look at it from a global standpoint, if we look at it from a big picture and look at those things in terms of prevent, minimize, and delay, we hope that we can make our children safer today than they were yesterday. Thank you for your time. I would certainly entertain any easy questions you have for me.
Yes, Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. So my kids are out of the school system now, so I don't have a resource to find out some of this stuff. Are the teachers and the students, do they go through training? You hear sometimes the kids say that they, at least in other schools, that they have gone through some sort of training or anticipation or drills or whatever. Does that happen in our schools?
Happens all the time. We train, and it is a difficult balance because while we're training, we're not teaching, and so it is that balance between how much time can we spend in exercises and how much time do we take away. But we do those training all the time. Fire drills, tornado drills, those are all safety protocols. Intruder protocols, we do those as well, so that it is a scary situation when it happens, and while we don't want to scare our children, they have to know what's expected of them when that occurs. And so we go through those trainings, and most of those trainings, certainly for these, are unannounced, because we don't want people to go, it's just a drill, I don't have to worry about it. So we practice live training with them. That's why we don't call them drills anymore, because fire drills, okay, here's a fire drill, and I walk outside because it's not a real fire. We don't want anybody to waste time in terms of these serious situations. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I was wondering how the effects of the referendum might have changed some of your plans for securing entrances. I know that one of the things on the referendum list had to do with securing entrances, and obviously that very, very unfortunately did not pass. So how has that changed the district's plans?
It did. It was part of the referendum, but it's one of those priorities that we believed was necessary, and so we just found other ways to fund it, and that work will begin this spring and be ready to go by fall.
Okay, that's very good to hear. That's reassuring, I think. Okay, Alderman Hoffman.
Is there any way that the school system could give kids like a psychological test, maybe a couple times going through school, to see if maybe there is children having psychological problems or is any kind of problem that would turn up that they could do some kind of preventative type, I don't want to say training, but step in and maybe they have problems at home, maybe they're just having psychological problems, it could, down the road, it could improve their life as far as maybe homelessness, drug addiction, things like that, and I don't want to say weed out people that are having problems, but, it might, it'd certainly probably be the time to do it and probably the least expensive time to do it.
Yeah, to provide psychological, the kind of psychological testing that would be required for 13,000 children would be very difficult and would certainly meet with great opposition by a vast majority of our families. And unless there's identified need, we can't, by law, administer a psychological assessment to students unless there is an identified problem that would require that kind of testing. It's a little like special education. We can't test students because we think something's going to happen. We have to wait until there's a demonstration of that, and then we can require testing to see if there's a learning disability or something else. But a carte blanche probably wouldn't provide us anything. Now, what we do with children who manifest disruptive or violent behavior, we do a lot with those students, whether it's sending them for a safety evaluation with a psychologist. We do those when that happens, but that's for individual cases as opposed to all 13,000 of our students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
This was
My
really
pleasure.
informative, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. All right, we're moving on to item number 2, the consideration of fiscal year 2019 board and commission work plans. We're not going to go to each individual liaison and have a presentation, but if there are questions, we can go down the list, and I'm going to start with Administrator Coakley.
I think Christina is going to introduce this topic, correct?
Okay.
So we can just go right to.
That's
our
fine. Assistant City Administrator White.
Thank you. In your backup material are copies of all of the work plans from the different commissions. This is something that we've been doing for the last several years, that we've asked the commissions to put together in anticipation of the upcoming budget year, all of the items that they've either been instructed by the council to do or items that they are requesting to add for the upcoming year. A couple things I want to point out, as Chair Goodman mentioned, we are not going to go through each individual one, but the liaisons are present to answer questions if anybody has any questions. But I do want to point out 3 items. The Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Commission has added a communication plan that they would like to introduce this upcoming year. That is a new item. The Environmental Advisory Commission has a training request for their upcoming fiscal year, and the Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals also has training request included in their work plan. And I point those out because we did a few months back approve a new travel policy for boards and commissions where they need to include that information in their work plans and in the upcoming year's budget. So I just wanted to point those out for your consideration. And I'm happy to answer questions as well as the rest of the liaisons.
Yes, Management Analyst Justin Miller.
I also just wanted to add that there is additional time on the bicycle, or the BPAC work plan for the bicycle-friendly community reauthorization for that. That was not included last fiscal year for my predecessor. I didn't include it this year because we ended up finding out that the date we thought we had to renew was different. So there will be some staff time of mine that will need to be given towards that to be able to renew that and to keep that certification. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
And that's the bike-friendly community certification? Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Well, we're very proud of that. All right, any questions on the particular work plans? We have a lot of people here available to answer those questions for the different commissions. Alderman Weidner.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions or not. I would make the motion to recommend the City Council approve the fiscal year 2019 Board and Commission work plans.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I had a couple of questions. I noticed, for instance, that they talk about mandatory training, but I didn't see anything on here about the FOIA and Open Meetings Act mandatory training. I know I had to do that when I was on the Plan Commission.
Yes, the board and commission members do have to attend mandatory Open Meetings Act training. That I believe is done when they first come on the commission. So it's not included in the annual work plan unless there is a new commission member, a new board member that comes on. They are not required to do it annually. And there is no additional cost that the city adds for that training. We just do it as a matter of practice.
I mean, I know it's a free training. It must require some staff time just to make sure all the various commissioners have been trained.
It's typically an email from our executive assistant and administration telling them that they need to do the training.
Okay,
Yep.
keeping track of it. Yeah. Okay, and then my second question, there were a couple things where it said, like 0 hours on an annual basis, but required by law, and that was a bit confusing, like in the Police Pension Board work plan. Just sort of wondering what that meant. The adjudication of claims for pension, 0 hours, ongoing, annual basis. And then compensation prohibited by state statute, but I don't know of whom or for what. It just couldn't figure out what that meant.
What that means is there's no paid staff time involved in those claims. It's all handled by the pension board by statute, and all the representatives on there are unpaid. So there is no actual staff cost to each individual claim themselves.
Okay, so there's no city cost for this function, but they do have to do it, and we're just estimating 0 hours because we don't know of any claims?
Right, we don't know of any claims, and when they come, we have no choice but to do them.
Okay, but in every year, we're going to put down 0 hours, but then at some point, we might have a claim?
I would assume so at this point, because we haven't had a claim in quite a while that I'm aware of.
Okay, so not too worried about that as being part of the work plan, but then there's always something unusual that could possibly happen. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, consideration of the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Commission request to close certain streets in conjunction with local Warrenville bike rodeo activities. I'll go again to Justin Miller.
Good evening, council. This is, again, just the yearly, happens yearly. This is for the annual bike rodeo sponsored by city, which is put on by BPAC as well as in conjunction with the Warrenville Park District. It is a request to close Stafford Place from approximately the library or the pavilion down to where the Veterans Memorial Circle is from 9 a.m. to noon on Saturday, May 19th for the 13th annual bike rodeo. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Hope you have good weather this year. Any questions? Any motions? Alderman Widener.
I move to recommend the city council authorize the partial closure of Stafford Place for the annual bike rodeo event as requested in the memo dated March 22nd, 2018 from management analyst and BPAC staff liaison Miller.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 4, the consideration of the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Commission request for City Council authorization to solicit and accept donations for that same local bike rodeo.
Good evening, council. Again, this is another request from BPAC in regards to the bike rodeo. This is to solicit donations. Commissioner Jerry Segru would be going to Target to be able to get the bicycles that are given away at the event. And Larry has been nice enough, City Treasurer Brenner has been nice enough to reach out to Dairy Queen for us to be able to get some tokens for kids to give away at the event when they get their picture taken with Mayor Brummel. So this is just again, a request to be able to go and move forward with that for the event on Saturday, May 19th. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Alderman Widener.
Yeah, we've been doing this process for about 13 years, so with that, I motion to recommend the city council approve the request to solicit bids for the 13th annual bike rodeo event on May 19th, 2018.
We have a motion by Alderman Widener, second by Alderman Wilson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, consideration of Police Department request for the City Council authorization to solicit and accept donations for the local National Night Out Against Crime event. Back to Chief Turano.
Thank you, Chairman. As a part of our annual preparation for National Night Out, we would ask that the committee recommend to the City Council authorizing permission for the Police Department to accept donations of money, in-kind services, and other items so that we can conduct our National Night Out Against Crime, which will be held on August 7th this year at Cerny Park. we have included a non-exhaustive list of businesses that we may approach and also a sample letter that we send out to the businesses. And if there's any questions, I will be happy to try to answer those for you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? I know it's a wonderful event, and we always get so many donations. It's quite impressive. People are so generous in our community. Alderman Weidner.
A motion to recommend the City Council approve the request to solicit donations for the August 7th, 2018 National Night Out event.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Weidner, second by Alderman Davalos. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, consideration of a request to dispose of surplus city property utilizing Obanoff Auction Services for 2 seized vehicles and 5 police vehicles. Chief Turano.
Thank you, Chairman. As a regular process, we appear before the committee asking for recommendation to the City Council, our ability to be able to dispose of certain vehicles that are either seized by the police department and turned over to us through the the DuPage County 18th Judicial Circuit Court, and also some either city vehicles or specifically police department vehicles that have been taken out of service. An inventory has been provided in the backup material, which indicates 2 seized vehicles that were awarded to the city and also 5 police vehicles that have been taken out of service. We would utilize, as we have for many years, Obanoff auctioneers, and 94% of the auction proceeds are returned to the general fund. 6% of the auction proceeds are used to pay the fees of Obanoff for conducting these.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions? Alderman Weidner.
I move to recommend the City Council approve an ordinance authorizing the disposal of city-owned property through an auction conducted by Obanoff Auction Services Incorporated.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Weidner, second by Alderman Wilson. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 7 is the consideration of a resolution endorsing the DMMC 2018 Legislative Action Program. City Administrator Coakley.
Thank you. This is an annual thing the council has done for a number of years now. The DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference has a very, very active legislative committee that reviews legislation and makes recommendations throughout the year. The conference collectively relies on the advice of that committee and annually adopts a legislative action plan. You'll see the format, they began this last year, is to make it a lot more simplistic, easy to read, easy to follow for lay people as well as for the legislators. So when they're handing off this material to a particular legislator, they can understand and reference it much easier than having all kinds of, we used to have pages and pages of detail and information. This is much broader of the topics about sustaining municipal budgets, public safety pension reform, preserving local authority, empowering local taxpayers regardless of population, and reforming Workers' Compensation Act to prevent abuse. There's a little bit more detailed information here, and of course, these can be used to then measure the conference's stance against legislation as it comes up. As you may know, there's approximately 6,000 bills that are filed every year in the General Assembly. Almost impossible for people to monitor unless they're doing it full-time. We're fortunate to have a good staff there and with the Illinois Municipal League as well. Anyway, that's some of the background on what this is all about. They have asked that each member municipality adopt a resolution showing the endorsement and support for the legislative action program. It does help when we're downstate with the conference that the communities that are members of the conference have shown their support, that it's not just the overall body doing that. So unless if there's questions, I'll be happy to try to address them.
Thank you, Administrator Coakley. Any questions or comments? I know this is a lot shorter than past legislative recommendations. I mean, I guess my only question was, some of the specific things in the resolution weren't in the action program, which was a little strange, about the loss of shoulder, loss of arm. It's very specific, but then it wasn't listed in the backup materials. I was just a little confused. I don't really know what most of these things mean. Man as a whole, permanency payments. I don't really know those terms. But most of the rest of the stuff had backup, where they talked about preserving local authority and empowering local taxpayers regardless of population and home rule status. But yeah, item 5 was a little strange, but just wondering if you had any clarification.
I hadn't really noticed that difference until you just brought that up, Alderman. I appreciate that. I think it probably would read better if we took those specifics out of it and just showed the 5 points relating directly to the legislative action plan itself for the program.
Yeah.
If they just have the same headings, they don't need this detail. This comes from previous details about workers' comp, some of the details that are involved with this. These are terms that are used in the risk management field, and especially in workers' comp for types of injury, and it gets down to how much loss somebody has. It's way more detailed than we want to get to tonight, probably. If you all wish, we can put that on another topic for another night, but for now, I think it would suffice if we simply remove those subpoints A, B, and C and just have the key points that relate right back to the legislative action plan. Makes it a lot cleaner.
I think that's fine. I think the key points are really what we're trying to emphasize.
Right.
If it's some older language that's sort of left over from something else, then it's fine to remove it.
So.
Okay. Any comments, any questions? Alderman Widener?
Motion to recommend that City Council pass a resolution endorsing the DMMC municipal legislative positions and priorities for the 2018 legislative session.
Second.
Any further discussion? Is that enough direction to include the edits, or? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 8 is the slot that we have set aside on our continuation of our fiscal year 2019 budget discussion. Again, Administrator Coakley.
You just said it all. If there's questions, we do have some copies of the budget here. If anyone has questions or concerns. Next Monday night is the first reading of the budget ordinance, April 2nd. And then 2 weeks from then would be the public hearing on the budget, and then presumably the adoption of the budget. We are required by law to have the budget adopted prior to the close of this fiscal year on April 30th. If there's any questions, we're finance director's here, I'm here, we'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions or things we want to discuss? All right, seeing none, this was an information-only item. We don't need to take any action, so we can move on to the next item. Number 9 is an informational update on the Administration, Police, and Finance Department work plans. Again, this is a informational-only item, but if anyone has any questions on those, now's the time to bring it up. Okay, we'll move on to item number 10, an informational update on the Administration and Finance fiscal year 2018 decision packages. The backup material is in your packet. If you have any questions, now's the time. Okay, the last item is under miscellaneous, is a commendation. It is a very nice letter from our old friend, Dave Shar, about officers that were dispatched to CDH in an emergency situation to assist the Winfield Police Department. And they sent their commendations and appreciation for our help and for the courage and aid from our police officers. So congratulations to them. I don't know if Chief Toronto wants to say anything about it, or?
No, this was just a mutual aid agreement that we have with all of our local police departments in the state of Illinois through the ILEAS Municipal Aid Pact. And In this particular incident, they had a subject that was armed with a knife in the emergency room, and we had equipment that Winfield didn't have, plus we had significantly more manpower on the street, so that we sent a few of our officers up there to assist them for approximately 90 minutes, and thankfully the situation was resolved with no injuries sustained by anybody.
That is what we like to hear. Thank you, Chief. All right, that is all of the business of the meeting, except one last thing. Alderman Widener. Alderman Wilson moves to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Alderman Widener. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.